Good afternoon and welcome to Tree Talk. I suppose it's episode 167, part one, but it's an end of year special where today myself and Matt will be looking back on the football year that Limerick had. We'll be looking at both from a county and club aspect. And just to tide you over today on Christmas Eve to get you towards evening mass, if that's your case, or even just get that bit of bacon for a sandwich before the big day tomorrow. But do stay tuned for all that.
The impression again we get out with what you put into it's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Curry. Curry leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it hard.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Matt, I suppose we'll be looking at the year in depth as we go along over the course.
Just check, looking back there on that intro, and it makes you sad that you see Eamon Ray being part of it, and it just reminds you of the great people that we have lost in the last 12 months as we reflect back in 2021. I suppose the two most recent big names being Eamon Ray and Tom McGarry, but there are many more, and players, former mentors, foot soldiers, volunteers in various clubs around the county. And I suppose at this time of the year, it's that time for reflection that we're thinking of them all at this time.
Yeah, for Christmas it can be, and the New Year, it can be a very sad time of year for a lot of people that have lost people. So we send our condolences to anyone that's lost anyone this year. But look, their legacy lives on. We spoke a lot about Tom and Eamon in recent weeks, and deservedly so, because they left their mark in Limerick GA. But for today, we'll be focusing on the football aspect, I suppose, Matt. We'll get into it in depth. But just from the outside, as the season kind of wrapped up there for the club aspect over the last 2 days, it was another positive year for Limerick football.
Of course it was, Jack, yeah. Reflecting back on the year, you have to reflect on a year of positivity. And why do I say that? You might say, show me the silverware. You're making comparisons with the previous year when we won the McGrath Cup and won Division 4 of the league. But Jack, there's a big step up to Division 3, and you've all those sorts of doubts when you move up a level. But like Billy Lee and his management team, and indeed the Limerick football fraternity must be very, very pleased and very, very happy with the way that Limerick made the transition from Division 4 to Division 3. Like, just to recap on what they did during the year, they had a win over Tipperary, which was hugely significant in the league. Unluckily lost to Offaly in Offaly. Now, of course, the randomness of the draw in the truncated groups certainly didn't favour Limerick. And we spoke about it at the time, where Limerick had their home game first, and then were faced with trips to Offaly and a trip to Wicklow. And now all the performances were significant but probably the most significant, Jack, was the performance in Ockram, because Ockram has been the graveyard of so many times for Limerick hopes and so many times for other counties' hopes. To come out of Ockram with a win, and to come out of it with a win by 10 points, Jack, that was a fantastic achievement. Now, Limerick subsequently qualified for the Group 3 semi-final, in which they were pitted against Derry. And, Derry are a good side, no doubt whatsoever about it. And Limerick gave them absolutely plenty of it in that semi-final in Carrick-on-Shannon. And then Derry, of course, went on and won the league. So that puts it into context. Now, if you reflect on the championship, like the previous year we had gone to the Fraher Field in the championship and dug out a decent win after being crowned Division 4 champions. dug out a decent win. But like we had a very, very, very convincing win over Waterford. Any day that you score 4-18 in a Munster Senior Football Championship match, that is a good performance, Jack. And there is you cannot take away from that. And then of course they came up against Cork in the semi-final, and again acquitted themselves very, very well. And I think if you reflect on the year in its totality, Billy Lee and his management team must be extremely, extremely pleased with the progress they have made, and must be looking forward to the coming season, which, Jack, of course, as we speak, is only around the corner. The McGrath Cup is less than 2 weeks away. So that will tell you how the world goes round and how it moves on. And like Limerick are due to go to Kerry on the 5th of January, I think, in the McGrath Cup.
Yeah, it doesn't be long coming around, and you give a nice summation there of their season. But I think it would be no harm to look at each game and their individual merit, because you learned a lot about the Limerick teams from each game, and starting with Tipperary and the Gaelic grounds. It was in the middle of May for a first league game. It was very unprecedented, but unprecedented is becoming very normal in these times. But after losing to Tipperary in such dramatic fashion the previous year, just missing out on the Munster final berth, it just kind of showed again the progress of Billy Lee's Limerick side, that they trailed, I think, midway through the game. I think they were 6-4 down at one stage, and just came back, and then he got that brilliant goal, and it kind of was the catalyst for the team. But it just showed the development of Limerick, who lagged behind Tipperary for so long, that they weren't just competing with them now on a regular basis. They were also able to beat them. They beat them in 2019, pushed them all the way in 2020, and beat them again in 2021.
Yeah, that was a fantastic start to the season. Now, Limerick were under pressure, Jack, right from the start. First of all, they were the promoted side. They were playing against the Tipperary team, who they had suffered heartbreak to the previous year in the championship, and you rightly said that was a motivating factor. But I think really what was a serious factor here, Jack, was that you were playing your only home game, and you were playing it first. And like there was very, very little room for latitude. There was very little latitude for failure. And, fail or even draw that game with Tipperary. And like you had a mountainous task going to Offaly and Wicklow. But what that win did for the confidence was absolutely fantastic. And like, just, it was barely the break of the ball that prevented Limerick from coming out of Tullamore with a victory. 16 points to 111. Like, they pushed Offaly, John Mahon's side, all the way. And then you had that great win in Wicklow.
Yeah, you mentioned pushing Offaly all the way. Like, you don't want to run too much. It was 16 points to 111, a 2-point loss. But Offaly went on to contest the league final. They topped the group with 3 wins and 3. They beat Tipperary and Wicklow as well. But we mentioned that Aughrim win again, but you can't mention it enough, really, because as you said, so many teams have gone to Aughrim and come away with nothing, and Limerick had to win, because it was win or bust, really, because they didn't know how Tipperary were going to fare against Offaly. Limerick could easily have been in a relegation playoff and not the promotion playoff, but they went to Aughrim and got the job done, and got it done convincingly. 219 to 112, just to score 219 in Aughrim. Kind of transition from this Limerick side, because Limerick were always peak tough in defence, but the score 219 was a real indication of where they were going.
Absolutely, and you put that with the 418 that they got against Waterford, and that's the sign of a potent forward line, Jack, by any benchmark. What is it, 6-37 in 2 games? An average of 318. You can't argue. You can't argue with it. Yeah, that's absolutely correct, and we saw then when the defence was called for, particularly in the games against Offaly and the game against Derry and the game against Cork, that the Limerick defence was quite well organised, and stubborn and disciplined. You know, I know we'll be probably looking at some of the individuals in a second, but that made up that defence. But Billy Day and his management team had done a fantastic job in organising their defensive strategy. And I suppose you can say that has been the case for the last 2 years. But you'd have to say that in 2021, they stepped up a notch from that of 2020 because they were playing at a higher level. And they were playing against you know, teams that would be more likely to hurt you, but they still managed and they still dug it out and they still ground out the results.
Yeah, and then we mentioned Derry as well, obviously, and we just saw what Derry did for the rest of the year. They won the league fairly comfortably against Offaly. I think it was 21 points to 1-9, and they pushed Donegal all the way in the Ulster Championship. And we know how good Donegal were, so it's probably more of an indication of where Derry were at than where Limerick were at, that league semi-final. And Limerick only lost by 4 points in the end, 17-13. So building in the right direction, but I suppose there's no point putting a good league campaign together if you don't back it up with the championship. And against Waterford, we mentioned it so many times, put Waterford to the sword. Can you remember the last time Limerick scored 4 goals in a football championship game?
I certainly can remember when they scored 4-18.
Yeah.
Like cynics among us could dismiss it and say, look, that was the league and the championship and all that sort of thing. But it was a different year altogether, Jack, in that the league was running straight into the championship. So the championship was an extension of the league, if you like. So this thing like that, you have one form in the league and one form in the championship, that's a nonsense. Because there was no gap there. You know, Previously we played the league. We went back. Players went back to their clubs. They came back, refocused, and on for the championship. You've none of that. It was straight through. So there is a greater correlation between the league and the championship because of the nature of the structure of the competition last year. But 4-18 was a phenomenal score in the Gaelic grounds. Perhaps, you know, whilst you'd be delighted to score 4-18, Jack, absolutely thrilled with the magnitude of the victory. But you have to ask yourself in hindsight and ask yourself on the particular day, was it the ideal preparation for Cork in the semi-final? Probably not. I presume not. Billy Lee and his management team would have preferred a sterner test going into the Cork game. Because you were against a wounded Cork team who were going to take no chances. Because, like, you talk about the big 2 in Munster and the 4, what they like to sometimes call minnows. But I think that day is over. Tipperary laid that ghost to rest in 2020. But Cork were smarting after the defeat by Tipperary in the Munster final, and they were not going to take a chance against Limerick. So, like, you know, Cork came all guns blazing. So, you know, I thought Limerick were with Cork most of the way.
Yeah, they suffered an awful blow very early on. Gordon Brown, got us off to a perfect start. A point within the opening. That was the first score of the game. But then from that, Cork down the end scored a goal, and in the process, Donald O'Sullivan went off injured. And we know the importance of goalkeepers in modern day football, but he's not just a goalkeeper, he's the joint captain in Cork. But it was a huge loss, and it's one that's kind of hard to know how much of an impact it made, but it certainly did make an impact on the Limerick team.
Of course it made an impact if you lose your goalkeeper, and full marks to Aaron O'Sullivan, his namesake, who deputised for him as early as the 6th minute. You're right, Jack. You know, from making his debut, the Palace Green Club man did very, very, very well in the circumstances. You'd have to say, but that there is no doubt that psychologically the loss of your joint captain and the loss of your goalkeeper is a blow.
Yeah, it was certainly a blow, but to be fair to Limerick, they stayed with Cork for much of the game. I know in the end the margin of victory was 116-11, but I suppose it was a performance that could be looked upon positively. There was moments of the game. I remember Denny went in on goal at one stage, narrowly went wide. Limerick just went looking for that goal that never came. But I suppose it was really deflating at the end of the year to lose. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, Limerick had reached a 3rd successive Munster semi-final after winning a match in Munster for the third year in a row, and after waiting 7 years for a victory, to get that kind of stability is what was badly needed in Limerick, and it's just a case of making that next step. But Limerick are making those steps to get back to where they were, I suppose, in the early or the late noughties and stuff.
They are, and full credit to Billy Lee. He stuck with it. He's 6 years in the job, and he would be first to put his hand up and say that the first 3 or 4 of those years weren't easy. It's not too long ago since Billy was decrying that up to 50 players refused to come in and be involved. But fair dues to him. 99 out of 100 other fellas in those circumstances, Jack, would have walked away from it. But full marks to Billy. Billy stuck with it, and what we're seeing now is that we're seeing a vast improvement in Limerick. We're seeing him being very, very, very competitive both in league and in championship, and it's full credit to Billy for sticking with it and sticking with his plan and sticking with his ideas.
Yeah, and after the credit has to go to Billy Lee, and I suppose there's a core group of players that have been in there since the start and obviously accepted the invitation on day one and have stayed right through since. And there was a couple of standout players this year, but we were talking off air, and one real standout area of the team for Limerick this year was that full back line of Sean O'Dea, Brian Fanning and Mike Donovan. And I suppose you could talk about those players individually because they were so solid back there. I'm trying to look at the league. We didn't concede a goal against Tipperary, didn't concede a goal against Offaly, conceded one against Wicklow, but it was fairly elementary in a 10-point win. Didn't concede against Derry, didn't concede a goal against Waterford, and conceded a goal against Cork. So that's 2 goals in 6 games. And not only were the 3 boys so imperious in defending, they were brilliant going forward. And we might start with Brian Fanning because it was a stellar season from him at fullback.
Absolutely. For me, that was one of the Brian Fanning's performances during the football for Limerick football in 2020 are one of the standout moments for me. You'd probably say when he came on the team, he'd been around the team with 3 or 4 years, and he had been in a number of different positions and tried, and you wondered when he went in at fullback, but like a duck to water, Jack. He has taken to the position, and he has added considerable solidity back there. He's after a fantastic season. Now you had the experience of Sean O'Dea, very, very, very important. He has been a very consistent performer with Limerick for God knows how long now. Of course, the Fitzgibbon Cup medal with UCD, too many Limerick players haven't done that. And you have Mike Donovan, who certainly in 2021, in my view, reinvented himself. I've seen him out here in the south playing with Galway from minor level up along, and no doubt at all whatsoever, Jack, about the talent of Mike Donovan, an extremely, extremely talented footballer and a very versatile footballer. Now, and I suppose it's a sign of his versatility that he has just got in there at cornerback and made the position his own, because a lot of Brian's football, Mike's football, has been played out around the middle of the park, particularly in the middle third. And if you see him even in games for a cornerback, he has that propensity to go forward. So he has settled in very, very well. Jack, I suppose, we talk about the way that John Kiley rejigs his forces very, very satisfactorily. Like the same must go for Billy Lee. If you had said 18 months ago to us that we'd play 6 games in 2021 and that we'd only concede 2 goals and we'd have a full back line of Sean O'Dea, Brian Fanning and Mike Donovan, yeah, you'd agree with Sean O'Dea, but you wouldn't have seen the other 2 lads. But like they've made those positions their own, and they are a very formidable full back line.
Yeah, I suppose with Brian, that it was never doubt his ability or talent. It was just he was probably too versatile. A lot of players get caught up in their versatility that they can't nail down a position that managers just look, oh, he'll fill a gap. Whereas now he's really made the full back position his own. And for Mike Donovan, like he got in ahead of Paul Maher, and Paul has been brilliant for Limerick since he came on the scene. He was probably only a teenager when he first on the scene, that there's that kind of squad depth there. And going out the field, the back 6 was fairly set in stone, them 3 boys, but Ian Corbett was centre back. He played in the forward a bit as well, and then you had Gordon Brown and Bob Childs either side of him. But that unit at the back was very solid. And talking about Gordon and Ian and Bob, that they're very good defenders, but they're more so attacking players nearly. And it was a joy to see Limerick play that open, expensive brand of football.
It was actually. They are a very attack-minded trio now. Like, Bob plays all his football in the forwards, as ye well know in Ballysteen. You were on the receiving end of him at one stage during the year. Ian Corbett plays a lot of his football at midfield, as does Gordon Brown. But again, it's Billy Lee using his resources and getting the best out of his players. And he has built a very, very formidable defensive unit. Very, very formidable unit. And Jack, we can say it here from this remove, but the statistics say it as well. 2 goals in six matches.
Yeah, it was incredible. And then I touched on earlier when I said about the...
But Ian Corbett, you see, Ian Corbett, he's a natural leader. An absolute born leader, and those runs that he makes from the back, they're really hurting teams. We've seen him doing it so often for Limerick and indeed for Newcastle West. He is a juggernaut when he's in motion.
Yeah, there's a reason he was nominated for an All-Star in 2020. He's just that sort of player. But that defensive stability, I said, was probably never a question in Limerick. There's always that dogged nature, and they were able to combine that with a real attacking fluency going forward as well. And so it was coming from all over the field. I think we had 9 scorers against Waterford and a nice 2 against Cork. But I thought myself that 2 players really stood out in that forward line in Hugh Burke and Dane Neville. I just thought they dovetailed so well that they counted probably between assists and scores. I'd say the bones of 80-90% of Limerick scores. They were just magnificent to watch together.
Absolutely fantastic. Two fantastic footballers, and the worry you would have going forward that the loss of Danny Neville, who's obviously going to be a huge loss to Billy Lee for the coming year. So, they've been absolutely magnificent. But the forward line as a unit, Jack, has developed very nicely. Killian Fahey has dovetailed very nicely in its centre forward. You had Cian Sheehan at wing forward. Although you'd wonder, would Cian be more effective out at midfield, maybe even where he was for Newcastle West for quite a considerable amount of time. And you also had Robbie Burke in there and Adrian Enright. Very, 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 very good players. And we seem to have skipped the 2 men mountains at midfield in Tommy Childs and Dara Tracy. And it was great to see Dara Tracy back in the fold after his sojourn abroad. And it was as if he had never been away.
Yeah, it was a fairly set in stone team, but then the players that we haven't mentioned, the likes of Brian Donovan, Tommy Griffin, even Tony McCarthy, wing back, there is a real depth there. James Naughton played a couple of games. I haven't even mentioned Peter Nash after his performances for KP. There is a really strong squad.
Josh, what about Josh Ryan?
Yeah, Josh Ryan and his 45s, and also his play, his open play, I suppose, exploits. It's just Limerick squad is in a very strong position as opposed to where it was 2 or 3 years ago. You said we had no silverware this year, rightly so, but it was about progress. They're playing at a way higher level. They're probably looking, when they get into Munch Championship, it would have been a case of let's get a win, whereas now it's can we reach the final, and that's the next step for Limerick, is to reach that final.
It is. That's the next progression, like we did a couple of times already since the turn of the millennium, and we saw when we got to the final how well we accounted for ourselves when we got there. So that obviously, Jack, is that is the next step, and it's a hugely important step now, and it is sort of tailor-made this coming year now, and obviously that's a matter for another day, but a tough test in Clare in the opening round, then Waterford or Tipperary in the semi-final. But there is a pathway there to a Munster final this year. When you're avoiding the big 2, and we can see with Tipperary when we had this situation before, when Cork and Kerry met in the semi-final, we saw what transpired in the final.
Yeah, as you said, we'll leave it for another day, but that path is there, as you rightly mentioned. But for Limerick, looking at them as a whole, like, is there anything that they need to do to reach that next level, or is it just kind of they need that breakthrough win, that the talent is there, the management team is in place, the players are there? It's just probably a case of just getting over the line on the day that so many teams struggle with, is just to break through and get to that final, and from there we'll see all the fruits of the labour that's been in for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I suppose a Munster final is a holy grail. There's no doubt about that. And I know a final, Jack, is a holy grail. And we came so tantalisingly close to the league final this year, you know, that we got a sense of what it's all about. The previous year, there wasn't a league final because it was finished on the basis of who finished top. Getting to a final, getting to a league final, or getting to a Munster final. But as I said, with the split season now and everything, you cannot understate the importance of the league. The league has a new importance now, Jack, in that the championship is only there. One is running into the other. This thing of a time lag between the two of them, that's gone. You know, and dismissing championship for league forum and saying just that's the league and this is the championship, it's not as relevant as it was in the past under the old structures.
Yeah, and as well the Tailteann Cup, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but like there is so much scope for Limerick to start the year well. But I suppose it bodes well that in 2020 that Limerick hit the ground running in the league. One, I think, was the first 4 or 5 games this year, beat Tipperary in the first game. That it's just so important to hit the ground running. As you said, the league takes on, I suppose, a double impact in 2022, but we'll leave that for next year.
But this you mentioned the Tailteann Cup there. I don't know how one gets into it. I'm not sure of the mechanics of it. Would you want a mathematical mind akin to Einstein to decipher how that works?
Yeah, I'd say you kind of have to play it by ear. By my understanding, the Division 1 and 2 teams can't go into it, regardless what happens. I think if Limerick win the league, they can't go into it. I'm not sure about that. I know that if you get your provincial final, whatever division you're in, if you were the bottom team, Division 4, and you get your provincial final, you can't go into Tailteann Cup. But again, that's a story for another day. But before we move on to the underage teams in Limerick, and I said it at the very start, but it is real progress, Matt, that you're, I suppose, coming from a football background in Ballysteen, I always look forward to seeing Limerick and the always representation, but there probably wasn't that buzz around Limerick football the last, probably between 2010 when they last reached the Munster final to Billy Lee's appointment, and even going as far as last year, that there's that real buzz in Limerick football now, and the hurlers are doing so great, and it's brilliant to see like that. I love watching hurling. It's the best sport in the world. But it's great to see that the footballers are getting the recognition as well, that they're putting in the same time and effort as the hurlers, and they're starting to reap the rewards of that. And there's just a brilliant buzz around Limerick for all codes of sport.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right across the GA sports family. Like we saw the attendances that were at the ladies' football finals and the Camogie finals this year. So that there's an insatiable appetite out there among the Limerick GA fraternity, and I'm talking about it in its totality now, because sometimes we tend to talk about the GA as being hurling and football. I like to think about it as being the 4 codes, and there has been a great buzz. And Jack, it has to be said. Limerick GAA, Limerick Camogie, Limerick LGFA. Shout out to them. They did a fantastic job with their championships in a short space of time. Ran them in an efficient manner and in a timely manner. They did an absolutely fantastic job. And from our point of view here that are covering it and what's happening, it was an absolute pleasure to deal with, I suppose, the respective managers, first of all, Jack, and to our first port of call is generally the PROs. And let's shout out for Hughie Murphy, Colette O'Grady, who unfortunately will no longer be with us, has stepped down, but has been absolutely magnificent during her term, and we welcome on board Tony Green as the Limerick GA football PRO, Fiona Hickey in Camogie, and Niamh Richardson. They have been absolutely outstanding. It has made our job so much easier to promote the games with the interaction that they have with the media and their constant supply of information. It has been absolutely terrific, and shout out to those people. Sometimes we tend to forget about them, but again, I would say to the respective boards and the respective PROs, well done and a great year.
Yeah, it really was a great year, and I suppose talking about the PROs there, I suppose the management team as well. Obviously, Billy with the senior team, we had Jerry Sullivan with the 20s and Kevin Deaney, and then with the minor team, and all those teams regressing. Unfortunately for the 20s, it was a loss against Tipperary, but there's some nice footballers coming through from that side. And then with the minors, Matt, was really, I suppose, it kind of went under the radar a small bit during the summer, but reaching a Munster final is no mean feat in underage, because you do have Kerry and Cork. Now, I know that Kerry and Cork met each other, that they couldn't play the final essentially. But for a Limerick minor side to not only get to a Munster final, but to compete for so long. Now, I know in the end the margin was 117-13 in Cork's favour, but Limerick led going into the last quarter, and we heard from Stephen Lucy and Pat Annan, who have been there and done it on the grandest stage, that the importance of playing at that level at a minor grade to get that confidence, to know when you're facing that red jersey or the green and gold of Kerry that you're not in awe. And that Limerick side have taken the first step, and I suppose the first step for the academy as well. We've seen what the hurling academy has done, that hopefully the football will follow suit, and that was the first step.
Yeah, it was the first step, and a very, very important step. And we mentioned there in the context of the league and the significance of the victory over Wicklow in Auckland. I think there was a hugely significant moment in the year for Kevin Deanahan and his team, in that when they beat Clare. Clare had beaten Limerick. Was it the 7 previous occasions? Was it the 8th time they had met? And Clare had won the previous 7. That was a landmark victory. And of course, they beat Tipperary in the first round. And like, the performance in Thurles against Cork was one for the ages, Jack. And you're right, they led going into the last, into the second, at the second water break, the second half water break, Limerick were leading. You know, yeah. But Cork found that extra bit of gear, and I think they kicked 1-5 to a point in those concluding stages, something like that. But like, full marks to Kevin Deanahan. But you say about him coming under the radar. They probably did come under the radar, but it's only 2 years previous, Jack, that Kevin Deanahan took two teams, an A and a B team, to the Dermot Early competitions and won both of them. Won the Division A and won the Division B. So the nucleus of those players, plus a few others, made up that minor team. So like that was a minor team that was in gestation for a while. And you're right, Jack, it's a testimony to the work of the academy in football, and a testimony to that the academy system is working, and let's hope that it's only the start.
Yeah, it definitely is working, and
but full credit also to Kevin Deanahan and his management team. They did an excellent job, first class.
Yeah, it was brilliant. That Clare game came when I had COVID, so I was locked into my room for 10 days, and it was a real breath of fresh air. I suppose literally and figuratively, just to watch a Limerick team go to Ennis and beat Clare in their backyard after so many defeats and reach the Munster final. It was just brilliant to see. And
it blew the COVID out the window, Jack, did it?
Essentially, yeah. I jumped out the window then for joy, and for a small walk around Ballysteen. I didn't meet anyone, but there was 2 Ballysteen lads involved. It was great to see. And overall, it's building. And the 20s didn't win, obviously, but you had the senior team reaching a league semi-final, getting a win in Munster, losing a Munster semi-final, but a third step of Munster semi-final. The 20s, albeit lost the game, but there's a lot of players coming through, and the minor team getting 2 wins in the Munster Championship and reaching a Munster final. So growth all around from a county aspect. Moving on to the club aspect, then start with the senior championship. With a good senior championship, obviously clashing with the hurling, we missed a lot of it. But I suppose the cream rose to the top. Newcastle West, looking at their squad, a riches of talent that Jimmy Lee's disposal, and moving then past the Limerick Championship, they finally got a win in Munster. They beat the Nair 8-6. Wasn't a classic by any means, but the pitch, the rain that fell was very difficult for the players. And for Limerick again, it's another bonus for Limerick football that Newcastle were able to get a win in Munster. You can't forget the first win in 13 years. So for the club team, it bodes well as well going into 2022.
It does, Jack, and you'd have to say that the club structure overall, the way it was structured, I thought was very good. The introduction of the Premier Junior Championship and the Junior A Championship, I thought that was a very, very good move, and we saw what the upshot of all that was is that you had very, very little or no walkovers, or I think you'd only one walkover, was it, in the whole two, I think, in the whole lot of the competitions. But you had very, very competitive games, which is what championship is all about, lads playing at their own level. Yeah, we cannot underestimate or understate the significance of Newcastle West's win in the Munster Championship. It was a real monkey of Limerick clubs back, but particularly it was a monkey of Newcastle West back. Because in their two previous forays into Munster, they had done everything but win. In 2015, they had everything, but they did everything but beat Commercials, who went on to win it. Likewise, in 2019, they did everything but beat Nemo, who went on to win it. So look, I suppose it was their destiny that they at third time lucky that they would get over. That they'd get over the line against the Nair on a dreadful day for football, dreadful prevailing conditions. But they got over the line 8 points to 6, and you'd say they're only the Waterford champions. Didn't we beat what? Didn't we? We were eulogising Limerick scoring 4-18 against Waterford in the championship not too long ago. There's a complete contrast between county and club, particularly in Waterford. We've seen strong club teams coming out of Waterford, and none more so than the Nair, who in the last number of years have contested 3 Munster finals and have come very, very close, including 2014 when they ran Austin Stacks, who beat Newcastle West. Very, very close in the Munster final. So, it's a fantastic, it's a landmark victory. It's another landmark this year. It's another monkey off Limerick football's back. And all right, it ended in disappointment against Austin Stacks in Tralee. But overall, it was a very, very, very good year on the club scene for Limerick.
Yeah, and there's a couple of clubs that I just wanted to mention that had very good years, and I suppose KP is one of them. Killala Palace Henry winning the Intermediate Championship to go dual senior, considering they were only Junior B in 2014. It's incredible turnaround. Outside of that, I suppose in the senior grade, Galtee Gales, who were in their second year after winning the intermediate title, and were only junior 4 years ago, reached a semi-final. There was a couple of clubs that kind of put their hand up and said, we're here to challenge the likes of Adair, Newcastle, who have really dominated the last few years. Monaleen pushed Newcastle all the way. There's clubs building all over the place. And it can only bode well for Limerick, which has been largely dominated by the West. Obviously, Adair, Newcastle are West, you, Ballysteen, St. Kieran, these kind of teams that are all West.
Father Casey's.
Father Casey's. There's loads, even Rackhill. I would
just that we mentioned Father Casey's, Jack. You know, Father Casey's to me are an enigma. They produce so many talented underage footballers, and they don't seem to transition to senior. But if you look back on this year in its totality, Jack, they won the Premier Junior A Championship. They won the Premier Under-21 Championship. Now, the significance of the under-21 championship, and this is probably where they've made a statement and put down a marker. Despite all their success at minor level in the last 10 or 12 years, this was their first success at under-21 level in 10 years. They have been hovering or there and flirting with success in the competition in recent years, but they got over the line this year, which might suggest to me that they are finally making the transition right through the grades from minor to under-21 and hopefully up to senior. Because we've seen so many talented young footballers coming out, particularly at minor level, coming out of Abbeyfield. The minor football championship is nearly their exclusive preserve, Jack. They've been winning it so often, but they must be scratching their heads back there as to why they're not making the transition. But I would see the 2 victories possibly particularly the under-21 Premier under-21 victory, and to a lesser extent the Premier Junior victory has been landmark victories, and it just gives you a sense, Jack, of the amount of talent that is at their disposal. It's just a question of, we're going to wake up someday, Jack. Father Casey's will get it right, and
watch out.
We've been saying it for a number of years, but congratulations to Casey's on a fantastic year.
Yeah, I suppose they're very like doing hurling. That this underage success hasn't really, because of the senior success now. Doon have been competing, they've been getting semi-finals and finals consistently, but haven't got over the line. Another team that's building, Mungret won the Premier Minor or Premier 19 championship. That's what I call minor anyway, but they won that. They're another team that are building. They were beaten by KP in intermediate championship. But for all those great teams that we mentioned, I think one team stands above all else, and I suppose it's because of what they do in Camogie as well. But the Monaghan ladies football team, just like everyone talks about Lockmore, Castleiney, and they are a fantastic club. There's no doubt about that. What they've done is incredible. But Monaghan have essentially done the same thing. They won the senior championship. A week later, they won the Camogie championship with Newcastle. It's a huge turnover of players, but they were beaten in both finals in 2020. I think there's even 14 in the final, but they were beaten in both finals in 2020. So first of all, to have the resolve to come back and to go at it again and to go all the way. And they reached the Munster final. They lost out to Castleiney Desmond in the Munster Intermediate Championship final. But I suppose I think it's a nice way to probably finish the review of the year, to just talk about the Monaghan ladies football team, because they're an incredible bunch, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and like we had a great county football final. We had a great concluding stages to the ladies football championship, and we were saying earlier on, Jack, in the cast, about the appetite for games. Like we saw the crowd that was at the ladies football final, but there was also, you were at one semi-final, I was at the other, and there was very, very big crowds there as well. Very, very healthy crowds that you wouldn't have thought of in the past. And indeed, I was at we were at the junior Camogie games and junior football finals, and big crowds all around. Yeah, it was a fantastic year for Monaghan, and like they showed great form in Limerick, and like you'd say, going down to Valley Rovers, going down to play a Cork team in the Munster Championship, it was going to be a formidable task. Now they came out of it with a fantastic win. And you must remember also, Jack, that in the final they were leading with less than 10 minutes to go. It was the goal that Castle Island got that actually decided it in the finish. And like, what a significant victory it would have been for Monaghan and for Limerick ladies football. It would have exactly been the fillip that Limerick ladies football would have needed after coming off what was a disappointing year in the inter-county scene. So full credit to Monaghan. And then again, as you rightly said, Jack, they went on a week later, and with 10 of them on board, they went on and made it a Camogie double when they avenged the defeat last year, or the defeat by Killeedy in the final last year. And as Karen O'Leary pointed out to us, Jack, in our post-match interview, was very quick to point out to us, that when she was putting into context the significance of the double, that it was a huge turnaround from a double defeat in the final last year, which they suffered. Like, they went down to Elby's in the football final last year, could have won it. Went down to Killeedy in the Camogie final last year. So it was a huge turnaround, and full credit to an excellent group of girls in both cases, Monaghan ladies and Newcastle West Camogie.
Yeah, you mentioned the senior ladies football side there, and I suppose it was a disappointing year for them. And Donald Ryan has the part of the scene. I just want to say thanks to Donald. He was an absolute gentleman to deal with for the last couple of years. Graham Shine is the new manager there. And I suppose we finish here with this, Matt. What would be, I suppose, a good year for the ladies football team in 2022? And also, what would be a positive year for the men's team in 2022?
Well, Jack, we'll take the ladies first anyway. And again, I would like to concur totally with you about what your remarks in relation to Donald Ryan. An absolute gentleman to deal with, and did the best job he could in difficult circumstances. Now, Graham Shine is coming in, and obviously promotion, Jack. When you're in Division 4, that there can be no questions asked as to what the target is. It is promotion. Like, now, they were in a 3-county group last year with Carlow and with Offaly. That has been expanded to 4 this year because of the return of London, who will be playing all their home games in Ireland, are playing all their games in Ireland, and that includes a visit to Limerick in the opening round. Now, we cannot dismiss London. I saw London in the All-Ireland semi-final against Limerick in 2018 in Mallow, and they proved to be fine, tough customers. That was the year that Limerick went on and beat Louth in the final. They beat London in the semi-final that year. So, but that is what Limerick are facing. They have 2 games at home first this year. They're at home to London, home to Offaly, and away to Carlow. Now, they beat Carlow last year. They came very close to beating Offaly last year. And I see the number one target for the ladies' football has to be promotion. Yeah. And I think the footballers are there. But the sad part about it in Limerick football, or Limerick ladies football, is that some of the top footballers also happen to be top camogie players. And we're talking about the like of Rebecca DeLee, we're talking about Roisin Ambrose, we're talking about Debbie Murphy, Karen O'Leary, all fantastic footballers. You know, of that quartet, Roisin is the only one that tries to play both. And, you know, it's a tall order with the way the thing is, you know. But
Roisin has an advantage of being a student, I suppose, as opposed to the other girls. It's small, but like it's incredible to see. But I suppose the way things are in modern day, you can't really play both. It's just not really feasible. But I know what you're saying. It's a very valid point.
Yeah, like, because if you were looking at the Limerick Football Championship and you were going to pick your football panel out of it, there'd be the 4 first names in it, Jack. Practically, you know. Well,
you see in the latter rounds anyway.
There'd be 4 of the first, you know, that you would have picked out of the senior championship, you know. Now, like Drum are going to be up senior now this year, and that's going to be very, very interesting in 2022, because certainly Drum now, after winning back-to-back intermediate championships, are going to be a force to be reckoned with, Jack. They're definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with. So, Yeah, look, promotion would be and a good run in the championship.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. And then for Billy Lee's side,
I suppose you have to look at promotion again, Jack. You have to look at
would
promotion.
say solidifying Division 3 status again would be a positive. We just decided
It would, but
7 games.
knowing Billy will see himself as having brought his team so tantalizingly close last year. That will he want to go the extra step? Of course he will. And as we've already mentioned, what of course would be success, Jack, would be a Munster final.
Yeah, and the path is there. It's by no means easy. You've Clare in it, and then you're more than likely going to have Tipperary, and if not, you're going to have a Waterford side that beat them. But they will avoid Cork and Kerry with that path to the Munster final. It's almost too good to be true, but hopefully Billy Lee and his side can make it happen.
Very interestingly, the new Waterford manager, of course, will be extremely familiar with Limerick football. Ify Fitzgerald.
Yeah. Hopefully we won't be meeting Waterford. That there'll be that inside scoop, but
not that Shane Ronan wasn't very au fait with what was happening in Limerick football as well, living just across the border from us, but he has moved on to the Cork ladies.
Yeah. But overall, Matt, that's next year. Overall, it has been a hugely positive year. We've mentioned that word positive a lot of times today, and that's become, I suppose, a word that's become synonymous with 2021 for a bad reason, with reference to tests and cases and all that. But for Limerick football, it was another year, another step in the right direction, and hopefully we're looking for more of the same. But thanks to all those Limerick sides.
Well, what I'd say in summary, Jack, is that it was a year in which Limerick football was drenched with positivity.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice way to end it. A happy Christmas to all involved in Limerick football, and obviously further reaching to all in Limerick GA. In a couple of days, we'll have a special to look back on the hurling year that we had. It obviously yielded All Ireland honours and Munster honours and all that jazz for all John Kelly's all country inside. But for now, yeah, that's the football year in review. A brilliant year, and hoping for more of the same and more progress in 2022.
Impression again, we get out with what you put into it. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Johnny Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the war court today. No more about it. They made all the run, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We've had a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Curry. Curry leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it home. He's put it over.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.